Welcome to the ultimate deck guide for Daredevil in Marvel Snap. Today's video is going to start off with a deck list that you'll be able to build even if Daredevil is your very first Series 3 card. We're going to walk through some upgrades you can do to that deck as you slowly flesh out your collection. And finally, we're going to round out this video talking about a range of Daredevil decks that I enjoy playing with my mostly complete Marvel Snap collection in the endgame. Daredevil, for those not familiar, very powerful control/interactive card in Marvel Snap. 2 energy, 2 power. On turn 5, you get to see your opponent's plays before you make your own. Let's take a look at how we can go about leveraging this incredibly powerful effect. Because Daredevil has such a powerful effect on the 5th turn of the game, any deck that plays Daredevil typically has its 5 energy plays dictated by cards that synergize in a strong manner with it. Before we dive into the specifics of deck lists, let's give a quick rundown of cards you should always consider including when you're building Daredevil decks of your own at home, starting with Professor X. Ongoing, lock down this location, cards can't be added, removed, destroyed, etc. Professor X can often be a guessing game on the 5th turn, and Daredevil takes the guesswork out of putting this down in a manner that can deterministically win you a lane, sometimes entirely on its own. Gamora, and to a lesser extent, all of the Guardians of the Galaxies that gain a bonus when you know where your opponent's playing a card, work very well with Daredevil as well. Gamora in particular is a 5 energy play that curves nicely on that 5th turn when Daredevil provides its information, and getting 12 power worth of stats is nothing to scoff at for a 5 energy play. Hobgoblin is a card that's quite powerful, but is also often quite risky. If you can get Hobgoblin into the 4th and final spot in your opponent's location, it can often single-handedly win it for you. However, there's risk involved. If your opponent plays something to that final spot the same turn you're trying to deploy Hobgoblin, Hobgoblin's going to stay on your side of the board and lose you the game as opposed to winning it for you. With Daredevil, again, the guesswork is removed, and you can play Hobgoblin with a precise information that makes it incredibly powerful. Finally, a Series 3 card that works fantastically with Daredevil is Spider-Man. Kind of a more flexible Professor X in a way. It stops your opponent from playing cards at its location the following turn, meaning you're still free to add additional power there, but your opponent's going to have something like a Vision or a Doctor Doom to cheat extra stats into there, which is a lot more difficult for them. With that, let's go ahead and dive on into our first of half a dozen Daredevil deck lists today that are going to go ahead and leverage these cards and many others to great effect. Our first deck list today is all Series 1 and 2 cards other than the Devil himself, meaning once you have Daredevil, you're guaranteed to be able to build the deck that you currently see on your screen. This is a disruptive control deck that's looking to win the game by locking out a location or two. Storm floods something out, which we then follow up with high stat plays such as Jessica Jones or Lizard plus Rocket Raccoon to secure a win in one location. And then the precision information that Daredevil provides on the 5th turn typically means that Professor X and Gamora can lock out another. In the event that we need to break up whatever our opponent is doing to secure a game win, Shang-Chi, Enchantress, and Killmonger are all excellent at doing this. One thing to note in terms of sequencing with this deck is you'll note we have Rocket Raccoon at the bottom end of our curve. Rocket is essentially a build our own 6-drop in the late game. If we pair Rocket Raccoon with Gamora on the 6th turn, the two of them can provide 16 points of stats in a single location that we need to win. And Rocket Raccoon also works quite well following up Shang-Chi, Enchantress, or Killmonger when we need to be disruptive while also adding some stats to boot. This next deck list is the Series 3 fully upgraded version of the Series 2 deck we looked at moments ago. In particular, Rocket Raccoon gets upgraded into the hood to provide us with a 6-stat 1-power card with the demon that it creates, and Lizard gets traded in for Mysterio for not only providing a little bit of mind games, but also having a little bit of added synergy with Carnage and Nova, since those clones can both be eaten and hold bonuses when Nova blows up. Otherwise, this deck plays out very similarly. We're looking to lock up locations with Storm into a big play, and then Daredevil into Professor X or Gamora on the 5th turn. This next deck list that I refer to as Devilish Titania is a lower to the ground iteration of the disruptive Daredevil deck list we've been looking at. We trade in things such as Killmonger and Shang-Chi for a little bit more board control. Black Widow fills up one of our opponent's board spaces with a bite. Viper can kick a hood across the board to clutter up their space, and Green Goblin can happily hop on across to limit them even further. We're still leveraging Storm and Professor X to lock down locations in the mid and late game, and then the deck's other namesake, Titania, kind of serves as an additional copy of Hood to give us a big single energy play to play on the final turn of the game alongside Gamora or Enchantress, our disruptive 4 energy play. Enchantress is definitely a flex slot in this deck, and if you're looking to change her out, other good options are things such as Shang-Chi or Super Skrull if you have access to it, depending on which exact opposing decks you're interested in teching against. Daredevil is an excellent inclusion in the Cerebro 2 archetype. Cerebro, for those not familiar, is the 3 energy, 0 powerful ongoing card that gives all of our cards with the highest power plus 2 stats. This means if we construct our deck in a manner that everything in play shares the same highest power, they will all benefit from Cerebro's ongoing ability. This is why you'll note that the only card in our deck that has more than 2 attack to start is Blue Marvel, but Blue Marvel gets a pass because it has an ongoing effect that gives all of our cards plus 1 attack, so it brings everything in line so they still share that Cerebro bonus. Outside of Daredevil and Cerebro, other cards that I feel are must-haves to play this archetype at its full power level are definitely Mystique, so we can double up that Cerebro modifier, as well as Brood, who puts an incredible amount of stats into play. If you're missing other Series 3 or 4 cards in this deck, such as Goose or M'Baku, you can very easily replace them with your other favorite 2-power cards that cost 1 or 2 energy. Finally, it is worth noting that Hobgoblin is the 5 energy Daredevil synergy card of choice in this archetype, not only because our deck's really good at filling up its board spaces, but Hobgoblin is also the only Daredevil payoff that doesn't break that Cerebro bonus that we're looking to leverage by having more than 2 points of power. This next Daredevil deck list is a fantastic choice if you enjoy surprising your opponents on the final turn of the game. Because it's good at doing that, it also has some of the highest cube equity of all of the decks that I'm highlighting here, meaning you frequently win 4 and 8 cube games by keeping your opponents on their toes. The way in which we surprise people is through the use of Arnim Zola, powerful 6 energy, 0 power card that destroys a random other card at its location and then creates copies of them at the other 2 spots on the board. Zola has powerful synergy with Black Panther, a 5 energy card that doubles itself to 8 when it comes into play initially, and then the copies double themselves to 16 in the other spots, meaning Zola is effectively putting 32 power into play. But Zola also is incredibly strong with Gamora, one of our cards that works well with Daredevil. If you trigger Gamora with Daredevil on turn 5, getting her up to 12 power, when Zola splits her across the board on the final turn of the game, she can be 17 power worth of stats, even larger than Black Panther. The rest of this archetype is similar to the other disruptive Daredevil decks, with things like Storm to flood a location, followed up by Jessica Jones or Juggernaut to lock it up. We also have other board controlling elements with things like Killmonger and Enchantress as tech cards, and Black Widow, Scorpion, and Green Goblin to help us gum up the works early on. Something powerful to note about Zola in this shell as well is that it is an extra way to get power into that flooded location, because just because you can't play there doesn't mean Arnim Zola can't create copies there. Finally, I'd like to wrap up with a Daredevil Spider-Man deck today. Recent season pass card Zabu, 3 energy, 2 powerful, with the potent ongoing effect your 4 energy cards cost 2 less, means that we can not only play the amazing Spider-Man on the 5th turn, we can also play some follow-ups such as Absorbing Man to double up those web-slinging lockout abilities. With the perfect information that Daredevil provides on the 5th turn, if we get 2 Spider-Man effects, we're typically hard-pressed to lose a game where we get to precisely lock the opponent out on the 6th and final turn. The rest of this deck is fleshed out with other 4 energy plays that work well with Zabu, such as Enchantress and Shang-Chi as tech cards, and Sentry and Drax as additional ways to put big stats into play. At the bottom end of our curve, we have Carnage and Viper to not only clear away the Hood's detrimental -2 power, but also leverage that abomination that the Sentry creates on the right side of our board, turning that downside into an incredible upside in some situations. Finally, we do have Professor X as a second means to lock people out with Daredevil, because Spider-Man is a little shy sometimes and doesn't show up. Hopefully, after checking all this out today, you have some fantastic ideas on how to leverage Daredevil in your own Marvel Snap collection. If you want to see some of the decks that I highlighted here today in action, I'm going to link some deck highlights in the video description down below. As always, I'd love feedback on this ultimate deck guide so I can apply it in the future as I explore more cards in this way. I'd also love to hear suggestions from you all in the comments on which Marvel characters I should consider making deck guides for in the future. And finally, if you did enjoy my breakdown, make sure you tap that like button. It's free for you and helps this content reach more people. And if you're someone that's new to Hoaglandia for the first time and you stuck around all the way to the end, thanks. Consider subscribing to the channel. I post Marvel stat breakdowns like this, game news updates, and deck highlights here 7 days a week, and I'd love to see you back again. Enjoy the rest of your day, folks.